A major storm is on the way for the entire forecast area of the United States, including portions of the I-95 corridor and portions of the western U.S., central U.S., and even down through the Gulf states. It's going to be a big storm with snow, rain, severe weather, and much more. It's me, Varus. We're back with another video, and let's get right into it. So first we'll start out with surface analysis, showing what's going on currently in the lower 48 as of 21 Zulu, Monday, January 5th, 2026. First Monday, first week of 2026. So out here in the kind of northwest, north central states, we do have a low pressure right here. This is going to dive through, okay? This is diving through, going to bring some snow for portions of these areas, and then eventually into the northeast. Already on its way through those areas. Closer to the western coast, a very dynamic low pressure kind of sets up here as a cold front as this treks generally northwest and eventually into the northern portions of California and into Oregon. Another bout of heavy rain and mountain snows are likely. Further to the east, the high pressure in control, keeping conditions relatively quiet, as well as a little bit of low pressure, causing some more disturbed weather east of the mountainous terrain in Colorado, west more high pressure, and in the east a high pressure takes hold offshore, but that quickly moves out as that low that I aforementioned will make its way through and lead to some wintry and rainy weather for much of the northeast. So let's take a look at those alerts and indices. Starting out with the northwest, winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories all in effect, as well as some flood warnings and flood watches for portions of the northern California coastline and portions of the northwestern portions of the Washington coastline. This is all because of the low pressure that I mentioned, bringing an atmospheric river, this time a little further north, as portions of Los Angeles, SoCal, San Diego, even San Francisco gets slightly of a break. Mainly, I'd say north of San Francisco gets more of the impacts. And then, as you work your way just a tad more east, some wind weather advisories, winter storm warnings again for the Rocky Mountains, and some wind advisories. Sorry about that. Also taking place over here in Montana and portions of Wyoming. Go further east, stay up north, you have some dense fog advisories in portions of North Dakota, clipping extreme northeastern portions of South Dakota, northern half of Minnesota, as well as the southern half deals with more winter weather advisories and through central northern Wisconsin and northern to central-ish Michigan. That's all with that low pressure I mentioned. And then you'll start to see how some alerts start to get populated into the northeast most likely as we go on. So let's take it system by system. So right now the low that I kind of mentioned is still off the map. You'll start to see it come into view and eventually take place. So here you have it. You'll see that low kind of spin off. So actually, okay. So it stays stationary and then kind of goes south and then into the coast is what I meant. This is the actual system we're watching. It's this kind of Vancouver low, this Scandinavian low over in British Columbia, I'd say. That's kind of bringing some snow and rain. We see this very often. This is a classic Pacific Northwest setup. So the low, the atmospheric river, will continue to kind of just meander. Honestly, you'll see it come back north. It honestly just meanders northern California and south. That's the influence with that storm. The other storm kind of traverses its way along the British Columbia coast, and you see how it brings some heavy snows to the higher elevations and rains to the coastlines in lower elevations and valleys. So you see that, and then you kind of get that kind of first impulse, and then a bigger low, more dynamic even, I'd say, gets further on, and it just keeps going. Right behind that, another one as you get into the weekend. So it's going to stay, I'd say, northern California and south, like this pink line, I'd say, in south. It's going to be slightly active. Okay, I'd say more here and south. It's going to be slightly active, but not as active. Once you get north of that pink line, it's going to be active throughout the rest of the week and possibly hints into the upcoming weekend, okay? Where it does level off a little bit, but it continues, especially in the higher elevations. We got remaining snow showers and flurries. Taking it a little more east, okay? So there was your system we go back a couple runs, it was over here in the Midwest, Northeast. So that system kind of makes its way through. As you go to 18Z, here it is. Okay, making its way through. Mainly north. Boston could get some snow. Why are those winter weather advisories in place? For this storm right here, okay? This takes place Tuesday, okay? This is our next main storm, okay? This is why all those winter weather advisories. And it's not even for snow. It's more for ice and freezing rain. So you kind of see it take place. A little less robust on RGEM. But you see it take place. Widespread freezing rain. So this is where it's regular rain. And then hits the ground, freezes into a layer of ice. All throughout these regions over here. This is because if you take a look, see if we can do this kind of as accurate as possible. If you take a look at the 850 millibar temperatures, very warm, very warm, very tucked up into Canada. Okay, this is where your 850s are. Usually when it's below freezing in 850s, you can have a chance at some dendritic growth and more snow. But so warm at the 850 millibars due to warm air advection. Closer to the ground, 2-meter surface temperatures, it's much colder. Okay, you're below freezing for much of Minnesota, much of the northern half of Wisconsin, the UP, and some marginal cold in portions of central Michigan. Okay, and you see that kind of still there as you go before in the runs before that warm air advection takes place. So watch as that freezing rain, okay, kind of lingers in Wisconsin, Minnesota, but mainly changes to rain. Minnesota is a good example of warm air advection. You have your low pressure right here tracking north slash east northeast, and so you get this slight push of warmer air, and that's all you need. Okay, warm air advection always under modeled typically too. Starts out as freezing rain Tuesday morning. Michigan quickly over to rain by noon, if not just afternoon, and then some snow possibly as some colder air works its way in on the backside. But here it gets more interesting once you get towards the northeast. I'd say Philly and south, you kind of miss out on most of the precipitation, some light showers. Starts out as pretty hefty snow for interior portions of New England and some ice a little just south of that into just portions of the interior northeast overall if you want to see any wintry weather, but more interior New England. As if you're talking about interior northeast, I'd say central New York and south, it's mainly rain, maybe some freezing rain on at the onset in higher elevations. But there's your snow overspreading much of New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, and western New York. But you start to see some warm air advection tries to make its way in, but generally it holds steady because the low does weaken. You get a coastal transfer. If you didn't get that, it would likely change to more ice and rain through these regions. But you get this low, you'll see this low pop off, coastal transfer, so cold air able to seep back in and keep it all snow for much of, if not all of Vermont, most of New Hampshire except the southern portions, southeast portions, and same with Maine. Could get some mixing closer towards Portland, and you see that coastal transfer in that low comes a bigger system later on. And then after that, this is where the next system comes in. Let's go to the Euro for that. Okay, so here's your storm. Here's your Scandinavian storm for the west. Kind of the Midwest storm makes its way through the Northeast. And then what you get is some of that Scandinavian energy transfers south. You got this shortwave tropic getting ready to eject from the southeast. You get a merging of this energy, and then what do you get? A big storm, a cutting storm, is what this pattern would say favor as you have a ridge in the east, trough in the west. So something like this, and so any storm will likely follow that track and kind of cut, and you'll see that there. Okay, there's your low pressure, pretty dynamic. Some moisture gets hung up in the back, some uncertainty with it. Mainly rain though, even for portions that usually get cut because it's just so warm. This ridge is super tall. I mean, your ridge is basically like this. So if you're south of this black line, arguably I'd say right here, if you're south of that black line, it's mainly, if not all, rain, besides maybe some onset ice. So you see that low, it tracks through. Once it taps into some colder air in Canada, that's where you have some snow. But behind that, you see another low. This is something else to watch out for. This could follow the track, and this is where some colder air kind of seeps through. So if you kind of look at the boundary before this storm, kind of take it through here, cold air is kind of like through there. That's your 540 line. Let's just use that for example. And then you get your next low, 540 line is over here. Okay, that is a few hundred miles difference, and so there is where you can get some more snow. Starting in New Mexico, northern panhandle of Texas could also get into some snow, and you'll see how this eventually takes shape. Kind of shredded apart, honestly. I mean, you're there. You have two pieces of energy. This piece of energy just funneling Gulf moisture, causing very warm temperatures and rain from the Gulf states, severe weather and thunderstorms, into more steadier rains as you get into mid-Atlantic and northeast. Whereas this other kind of storm starts to feel the presence of this energy, tries to strengthen, and it will, but it's a little too late for anything big. But overall, if you take the big picture overall, pretty substantial storm. You see how dynamic that low gets. I'm using some heavy snow. Green Bay, UP of Michigan, all through these areas on the cold sectors. This low cuts through Michigan and then eventually wraps around, just showing how dynamic it is. You'll see, and that kind of kicks up the Lake of Machine just for a little bit in those areas before it's out, and this changes the pattern. Okay, this is what's going to lead to ridging in the west and troughing in the east. Okay, and you'll see that as I kind of go through the pattern progression. And then in terms of northeast, all rain except for Maine. Could start out as some ice. I'd say like Caribou, northern Maine, extreme northern Maine. You'd have to stay. You may be able to stay all snow, but never doubt any ice mixing in with how warm air noses are always undermodeled. Maybe portions of extreme northwestern New Hampshire could, or northeastern New Hampshire could experience some wintry weather, as you may have some very, very light cold air damming as high retreats. So that's that, and right behind it, again, very cold air. So let's talk about that 500 pattern. Okay, let's go. This is 12Z. We'll just work with this. Big positive EPO in the current pattern, okay? Because you have some big time troughing in Alaska. Been pretty abnormal, I'd say, past couple of days. Here's your short wave right now. Okay, getting ready to eject. You'll see it drop south and east, and then it'll get ready to eject. Here's your ridge in the central U.S. diagonally working its way east. And here you have it, okay? Little trough here. This is because of that one storm that's bringing that wintry mix to portion of the northern Midwest. Comes offshore. Kind of starts to get stronger, but that's once it's offshore and becomes more of a problem for eastern Canada. Here's your short wave right here, okay? Kind of was over here. Gets down, gets ready to dig. You'll have this northern piece of energy that helps to eject it, okay? Again, doesn't quite merge into a big storm, but all the pieces are there for still an impactful system. And there you have it, okay? That ejects through. So you kind of have your trough right here. It kind of gets caught up, and then you get more amplification because of that catch up and kind of gets back in here. You get another one to dig. This will be stronger. Rides the baroclinic zone. See where these millibars are tight? That's where it'll likely track right through. Okay, that was kind of bad picture. So right through here, or where your lines are tight. So let's see your short waves right there. It's gonna track like that. Okay, and then eventually spins around just because of how dynamic it is, and then heads out. So it kind of spins around and heads right back north and east. So you'll see it right there generally, okay? And this is what brings that pattern change, because right behind it, you have a ridge. Okay, you still have that positive EPO in the east, negative NAO, but you start to get that positive PNA after this negative PNA, okay? Short-lived. Heads east, kind of sets the tone. You kind of get this 50-50 low, negative NAO. Positive EPO gets beat down, you get a positive PNA. What this does, all together, forces a trough to develop in the east. Okay, this is that storm way up here. Helps to keep this ridge over here, so you have troughing, ridging, troughing. And then with that trough, your Alaska, I mean, it gets beaten down a lot. And you have this positive PNA, not spiking crazy, but it's there. Very, very light negative NAO through January 14th. So especially once you get to midweek, I'd say next week is where it really starts to kind of ramp up. And there you have it, okay? It's interesting, though, because through, I'd say, midweek to late week is where it's most favorable for East Coast cyclogenesis. So you have this positive PNA. It's a little off-centered. I'd say you'd want this just a tad. Honestly, you'd want this more west. You'd want this kind of like this. ish. Okay, maybe the trough should dig a little more. Something like that. Okay, no, that's really bad. I'd say something like that. Okay, something like that. You'd want the ridges spike closer to Montana and Idaho. But so it's farther out here, so amplification, downstream amplification gets a little harder, but it's there. Okay, southern stream, you get, it's very small signs, but you have some sort of southern stream trying to get going through here. Okay, you have a gateway for northern stream energy. It's very, very bland though, and so you'd want to see this southern stream, this connection happen more. You'd want a connection up here so you could see stronger storm signal. This would be the shot, I'd say, for mid-Atlantic peeps. Further south, I'd say, if you'd want a kind of a bigger storm, or at least some sort of moderate storm, because after that, it kind of, the trough recenters itself a little more towards central U.S. We have seen some trends further south and east, but here is kind of a classic La Nina look. Now, you still have that ridge spiking up in Alaska, which is good. Very slight negative NAL, but it's there. Hints of a 50-50 low. So these are all working in your favor right here. What isn't is the southeast ridge right here. The southeast ridge can flex, okay? And so you will have lots of overrunning events. And so you could get a low, for example, that tracks up here and brings rain to portions of DC, Baltimore, Philly, through New York City, and gets a nice little snowstorm for southern New England, northern portion of the Northeast overall, Boston, all those areas. Or you could get a low, if that's when the southeastern ridge would flex. If it's a little more suppressed, you still have this. What's good about this pattern is your cold shot is directly from the Arctic. Okay, if you had a ridge kind of up here and this trough was over here, you wouldn't have the freshest supply of cold air, but you have it there. So this also can scream cold air damming setups. Okay, so you have fresh injection of cold air. If your low tracks further down here, more snow could get closer to like DC, Philly, Baltimore, all these areas. But it's going to be a battle zone. This is where it could get fun for, I'd say, these areas right here. Okay, so we're going to watch it. Storms like to ride the barrel cleaning zone. Depending on how that southeast ridge flexes, will be more snow up north, rain south, or maybe can sneak a little more south. And so that's going to be pretty big pattern. Some signs of flexing towards the end. And it's a very fragile pattern though, because then you see how this trough generally, the blue's kind of like that. So you're seeing more trying to flex here, so that could be negative PNA starting to redevelop, and another ridge for the east. Definitely very far out, 360 hours out, and we've seen some good trends, at least for this period in the past 24 hours or so. We'll see if those trends continue. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. That's about it, everything I had. Have a great rest of your day. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.